Stop! Thief! The shout sliced through the damp morning air of the open-air market, sharp as a butcher's knife. Mr. Griggs, the formidable grocer whose face was a permanent roadmap of scowls, had a vice-like grip on a small, wiry arm. 7-year-old Maya froze, her entire body rigid with terror. Her knuckles were white where she clutched the object of her crime, a single, slightly bruised red apple. "I saw that, you little rat," Griggs snarled, his voice a low rumble that drew curious, judgmental stares. "Third time this week I've seen you sniffing around my stall." Maya's eyes, large and luminous with unshed tears, darted past the grocer's furious red face. They weren't looking for an escape route. They were fixed on the bundled heap of rags slumped against the graffiti-stained brick wall of the alley 50 feet away. It's not for me," she whispered, the words catching in her dry throat. "He's hungry." Griggs let out a harsh, barking laugh. "He's hungry? Look around, kid. Everyone's hungry. You pay, or I call the cops." From the shadows of the alley, a pair of hollow, piercingly intelligent eyes watched the scene unfold, hidden beneath a matted tangle of gray hair. The man in the alley, known to the street as Artie, was anything but a simple vagrant. He was Arthur Vance, a man whose net worth fluctuated with the stock market, but always remained comfortably in the 10-figure range. He was the invisible titan of global logistics and tech, the owner of the very skyscrapers that cast long, cold shadows over this impoverished district. And for the past 34 days, he had been living in this alley, sleeping on cardboard, eating from dumpsters. It was a penance, a desperate, fractured pilgrimage into the world that had swallowed his son. His son Thomas, who had rejected the Vance fortune, who had called his father a dragon hoarding gold, and who had died of an overdose in a squat just 3 blocks from here, invisible to the world, and most of all, invisible to his father. Arthur had come here to find his son's ghost, to understand the anger and the despair, but all he had found was a profound, soul-crushing emptiness and the chilling indifference of the world he had helped build. He watched the scene at the apple stall with a detached coldness that had been his armor for decades. He saw the girl. She was tiny, with stringy brown hair and a jacket 3 sizes too large. He'd seen her before, collecting cans with a fierce concentration. He saw Griggs, a man drowning in his own small-time frustrations. And he felt nothing, just another small cruelty in a world built on them. Griggs tightened his grip and Maya let out a small yelp of pain. I'm sorry. Please," she cried, finally looking at the grocer. "I'll put it back." "Too late for that," Griggs spat. "You've bruised it with your grubby hands." And then, the girl did something that pierced Arthur's self-imposed fog. She didn't cry for herself. She didn't beg for mercy. She held the apple out, her small, dirty hand shaking violently, and pointed with her chin toward the alley. "Please, mister, just let me give it to him. He's sick. He hasn't eaten." She was pleading, not for her freedom, but for the completion of her mission. She had stolen for a complete stranger, a man who was in her eyes even lower on the food chain than she was. A jolt, like a forgotten electrical current, passed through Arthur Vance. He saw not a bundle of rags, but himself. And he saw this child, this thief, as the only person in a month who had truly seen him. Slowly, painfully, Arthur pushed himself up from his cardboard nest. His joints ached with a damp cold that had settled into his bones. He was filthy. His designer suit, worn for 34 straight days, was a tattered ruin, his beard matted. He looked every inch the broken man he was pretending to be, and every inch the broken man he was truly becoming. He shuffled forward, each step an effort. The small crowd parted around him, looks of disgust on their faces as he passed. The smell of him, unwashed body, cheap whiskey, a prop he used to keep others at bay, and alley grime was potent. Griggs saw him approaching and his face curdled further. Oh, great. The whole circus is here. Get lost, Artie. This ain't your business. Arthur ignored him. He reached into the deep pocket of his ruined overcoat. His fingers brushed against the thick, emergency-only roll of hundreds he kept there. A lifeline back to his old world. He ignored it. Instead, he dug deeper into the other pocket, the one with his real money. He pulled out a crumpled handful of singles and loose change. It was the money he'd made collecting cans himself. A pathetic $4. 28. He smoothed out 2 of the dirtiest dollar bills and held them out to Griggs. His voice was a rusty croak. For the apple. Griggs stared at the money, then at Arthur, as if he'd just sprouted a second head. What, you're with her? For the apple, Arthur repeated, his voice gaining a sliver of its old authority. And for the trouble. Griggs looked from the money to Maya, then back to Arthur. The absurdity of the situation, of one homeless person paying for a stolen apple for another homeless person, seemed to break his anger. He snorted, snatched the 2 bills from Arthur's hand, and roughly shoved Maya forward, releasing her arm. Fine. Whatever. Take the stupid apple. And you, he jabbed a finger at Maya. Don't let me see you around here again. He stomped back to his stall, muttering about the freaks the city coughed up. Maya stood paralyzed, rubbing her arm. She looked up at Arthur, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. He was even scarier up close. Tall, gaunt, with eyes that seemed to burn a hole right through her. He looked, she thought, like a sad, broken giant from one of her sister's books. Arthur nodded toward the apple still clutched in her hand. You were right, he rasped. I am hungry. Maya's expression shifted instantly from fear to a profound, almost maternal seriousness. She looked at the apple, then at him. She marched over to the wooden crate at the edge of the alley and, with a sharp, practiced movement, slammed the apple down on the corner, splitting it cleanly in 2. One half was slightly larger than the other. She walked back, her small form silhouetted against the bright morning light. She held out the larger half to him. You should have this, she said, her voice small but firm. You're bigger. Arthur Vance stared at the offered fruit. He had negotiated multi-billion-dollar mergers. He had addressed the World Economic Forum. He had crushed competitors without a second thought. But he had never, in his 62 years, been rendered so utterly, completely speechless. This child, who had nothing, had risked punishment to get food for a stranger, and was now offering him the larger share of her spoils. He felt a cracked spiderweb across the icy facade of his grief. It was a painful, searing sensation, like a frozen limb thawing too quickly. His hand, shaking not from cold, but from an emotion he couldn't name, reached out and took the apple half. Their fingers brushed. Hers were small and calloused. His were rough with a grime that no amount of money could wash away. Thank you, he whispered. The words felt foreign, heavy in his mouth. Maya gave him a small, hesitant smile. It was like a sliver of sun in the grim alley. My name's Maya, she said. You're Artie. I see you here. She didn't wait for a reply. She clutched her own, smaller half of the apple and darted out of the alley, disappearing into the crowd. A tiny boat swept away by the current. Arthur stood alone, the apple half growing heavy in his palm. He leaned against the cold brick, the shouts of the market fading to a dull roar. He looked at the bruised flesh of the fruit, a single tear tracing a clean path through the dirt on his cheek. It wasn't just a reaction, it was a resurrection. He hadn't found his son's ghost. He had found something else. He had found Maya. He finally understood what Thomas had been railing against. It wasn't the money. It was the invisibility. It was the coldness. It was the assumption that a bruised apple was a debt to be collected rather than a gift to be given. He took a bite of the apple. It was sour and mealy, the worst apple he had ever tasted. And it was, without question, the most precious thing he had ever held. Maya ran. She didn't stop until the smells of the market, sawdust, rotting vegetables, and diesel fumes, were replaced by the familiar, closer scent of damp pavement and overflowing dumpsters. She lived 4 blocks away, in the Stanton Building, a 6-story brick tenement that had been crumbling for longer than she'd been alive. Its grandeur was long faded, now just a collection of overcrowded apartments, shared bathrooms, and the constant, thrumming anxiety of people living on the edge. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her sneakers, with their flapping soles, making soft thwack-thwack sounds on the worn linoleum. She burst into apartment 4B, a 1-room studio that she shared with her older sister, Ilara. The apartment was tiny, dominated by a sagging double bed they shared, a small kitchenette with a hot plate, and a drafting table covered in charcoal sketches. Ilara, at 19, was Maya's entire world. She had been since their parents died in a car crash 2 years prior. Ilara had dropped out of her community college art program to take on 2 jobs, a morning shift as a waitress at the Greasy Spoon Diner downstairs, and an evening shift cleaning offices in one of the sleek, dark towers downtown. She was sitting at the table, her back to the door, a pencil in her hand, but she wasn't drawing. She was staring at a piece of paper, an official-looking one. "I got it," Maya announced, holding up her half-eaten apple like a trophy. Ilara turned, and the forced smile she conjured couldn't hide the redness in her eyes. "Hey, Squirt, where did you get that?" "The market," Maya said, conveniently omitting the part about Mr. Griggs. "I saved half for you, but I met a hungry man, so I gave it to him." Ilara's smile became a little more genuine. "You did you? That's my girl. Always thinking of others." She pulled Maya into a hug, burying her face in her sister's messy hair. She held her tight, as if Maya were an anchor in a storm. "Ilara, are you crying?" Maya asked, her voice muffled against her sister's thin sweater. No, Ilara lied, pulling back and wiping her eyes quickly. "Just tired and this." She tapped the paper on the table. Maya squinted at it. She was a good reader for her age. She saw the big, scary words, final notice, and eviction, and a name she couldn't pronounce, Vance Holdings Property Management. "Are we moving?" Maya asked, a flicker of excitement in her voice. "To a house with a yard?" Ilara's heart broke. She didn't have the strength to shatter that hope. "Something like that, sweetie. We have to figure some things out. I'm a little short on the rent this month." A little short was a catastrophic understatement. The diner had cut her hours, and the property company had, without warning, tacked on a building improvement fee that was more than half the rent, despite the fact the only improvement in months was a new, brighter bulb in the broken elevator. She had 3 days. 3 days to come up with $1,400 she didn't have. "I can help," Maya said, her face lighting up. "I can collect more cans today. I'll go right now." "No, Maya," Ilara said firmly, catching her arm. "You're not." "No. It's my job to worry about this. Your job is to be a kid. Now show me that drawing you were working on yesterday. The one with the dragon." Maya, sensing the finality in her sister's tone, relented. She fetched her crayon drawing of a dragon, but as she explained the different colors, her mind was back in the alley with the sad, broken giant named Artie. She wondered if he had a home they were taking away, too. Miles away, in a part of the city that didn't so much touch Maya's world as hover over it, Arthur Vance was undergoing a transformation. He had left the alley an hour after Maya, moving with a new, unsettling purpose. He walked 20 blocks, past the soup kitchens and the payday lenders, until he reached the glass and steel monolith of the Vance Tower. The security guard in the private lobby, a man named Marcus whom Arthur had known for a decade, saw a vagrant approach the doors and immediately moved to intercept, his hand on his taser. "Sir, you can't be in here. This is a private building." Arthur stopped, looking at his own reflection in the black marble wall. He was unrecognizable. "Marcus," he rasped. The guard froze. He squinted. He had heard that voice every day, but it was coming from the wrong face. Mr. Vance? Call Harris. Tell him I'm coming up, and find a way to get me to the service elevator without an audience." An hour later, Arthur was standing under the scalding spray of a rain shower in his penthouse apartment, a 3-story glass box on top of his building. The grime of 34 days swirled down the drain, a gray-brown river of his penance. He scrubbed his skin raw, trying to wash away the alley, the cold, the smell of despair. But he couldn't wash away the feeling of the apple in his hand. He couldn't wash away Maya's eyes. He emerged from the shower, shaved his matted beard, and put on the uniform of his old life, a cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. He looked in the mirror. The face was his, but the eyes were different. The hollowed-out grief was still there, but it had a new, sharp edge. A fire had been lit. His head of security, a former MI6 agent named Harris, was waiting in the vast, empty living room, holding a steaming mug of black coffee. Harris was a man of few words and absolute discretion. He had been the one to find Thomas's body. He had been the one to facilitate Arthur's disappearance onto the streets, protesting vehemently, but obeying nonetheless. "Sir," Harris said, his voice flat. "You're back." "I am," Arthur said, taking the coffee. The porcelain was warm, the liquid bitter and strong. It tasted like artifice. "Your experiment. Did you find what you were looking for?" Arthur sat on a white leather sofa that cost more than Alara's entire building. He looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. He could see the cluster of run-down brick buildings in the district he had just left. "I found something I wasn't looking for," Arthur said quietly. "I need you to find someone, a little girl. Her name is Maya, about 7 years old. Stringy brown hair, jacket too big. She's remarkable." Harris raised an eyebrow, the closest he ever came to showing surprise. "Find her how, sir? A last name? An address?" "The farmer's market on 9th and Stanton. There's a grocer there named Griggs. She had an encounter with him this morning, around 8 a.m. She stole an apple." Arthur's voice caught on the word. "She lives in the tenements near there. She might have an older sister." "That's not much to go on, sir," Harris said. "Then be creative," Arthur snapped, a flash of his old self. "I want to know everything. Who she is, where she lives, what her situation is. Everything." "And Harris?" "Sir, be invisible. I don't want her or anyone else to know they're being watched. I need to know she's all right." Harris nodded, already typing into his secure phone. "Understood. And what about the company? Your VP, Mr. Donovan, has been creative in your absence." "I'm sure he has," Arthur said grimly. "Cancel all my meetings for today, except one. Get Donovan up here now. It's time I came back from the dead." While Harris activated his network of quiet, efficient investigators, Maya was on her own mission. Despite Alara's words, she knew "a little short" was code for danger. She had heard the whispered, frantic phone calls Alara made, the way her voice cracked when she said, "I just need an extension." Maya knew that the only thing she had of value was her time and her ability to be small and quick. She slipped out of the apartment with her frayed burlap sack. She bypassed the market, giving Mr. Griggs's stall a wide berth, and headed for the rich streets 10 blocks west. The trash cans there were different. They were cleaner, and people threw away everything. She found half a sandwich in a wrapper, which she ate immediately. She found 3 empty water bottles and 5 soda cans. A good haul. She was digging in an alley behind a fancy restaurant when she felt a presence. She looked up and saw a man in a clean, dark suit standing at the alley's entrance. He wasn't looking at her, but at a building across the street, speaking quietly into his phone. Maya froze. He looked like a cop or a social worker, the 2 kinds of adults Alara had warned her to avoid. This man was neither. He was one of Harris's men, a surveillance expert. He glanced at Maya, his eyes lingering for just a second, and then he moved on, turning the corner. But the brief, analytical glance was enough. He'd seen her face. He'd matched it to the grainy CCTV footage Harris had already pulled from the market. He spoke into his mic. Target acquired. Subject is a young female matching the description, currently collecting recyclables on 12th and Grove, following on foot. Maya's heart hammered. She felt seen. Wrongly seen. She grabbed her sack, now heavy with only a few dollars worth of aluminum, and bolted. She ran back toward the safety of her own neighborhood, her mind racing. Who was that man? Was he from Mr. Griggs? Was he the real police? She didn't go home. She went to the one place that felt like a strange, new sanctuary. She went to the alley by the market. She peeked around the corner. The pile of cardboard was still there, but the sad giant, Artie, was gone. A wave of disappointment washed over her. She sat down on his cardboard nest, pulling her knees to her chest. The alley was quiet, a respite from the noise of the market. She just wanted to sit and think. She didn't know that another of Harris's men, a woman this time, was sitting in a parked car across the street. Camera with a long-range lens documenting her every move, tracing her path back to the Stanton building. Back in the penthouse, Arthur was at war. His second-in-command, Julian Donovan, was a man in his late 40s who dressed in impeccably tailored suits and saw the world as a series of assets and liabilities. He had been thrilled by Arthur's sabbatical, as it had given him free rein. "Arthur, you're back!" Donovan boomed, striding into the living room, his hand outstretched. "We were worried. The board was fine, Julian. You had everything under control, I'm sure." Arthur didn't take his hand. He gestured to the pristine financial reports on the glass coffee table. "You've been busy." "Productive, Arthur. Productive." Donovan smiled, unbothered. "I took the liberty of accelerating the urban renewal project in the Stanton district. We've finalized the acquisition of 3 more blocks. The profit projections are staggering. We'll have the old tenements down by Q1 and the new luxury condos breaking ground by Q2. Arthur felt a cold pit open in his stomach. The Stanton district. 9th and Stanton? That's the one, Donovan said proudly. The jewel in the crown. It's a gold mine, Arthur. We got the zoning board to fast-track the permits. Full eviction notices went out this week. It's a clean sweep." "A clean sweep," Arthur repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "And the people who live there?" Donovan shrugged, a tiny, elegant movement of his expensive shoulders. "They're tenants, Arthur. They relocate. The city has programs. It's not our concern. Our concern is to the shareholders, and the shareholders will be very, very happy." "I was there, Julian." Donovan's smile faltered. "There? At the meeting?" "No. There. In the Stanton district. On the street. I've been living there for a month." Donovan stared, his polished facade cracking. He looked for a sign of a joke, a mental breakdown. "Arthur, I don't understand. Are you unwell?" "I've never been more well in my life," Arthur said, standing up. He walked to the window, his back to Donovan. I want to see the file on the Stanton building, the one on 9th Street. I want to see the eviction roll. I want to see the building improvement fees you've been charging. A bead of sweat appeared on Donovan's temple. That's highly specific, Arthur. That's granular data. My team handles that. I'm focused on the macro strategy. The, the vision. Get me the file, Julian. Now, bring it to my office and cancel the demolitions. Cancel them? Donovan yelped, his voice rising. Arthur, we have contracts. We have penalties. We can't just cancel a $100 million development. I can, Arthur said, turning. His eyes were no longer hollow. They were chips of ice. I just did. Get me the file. Donovan, for the first time in his career, was speechless. He saw the man who had built the Vance empire from nothing, the ruthless negotiator, the man they called the vulture in the press. He wasn't unwell. He was back. And he was angry. Yes, Arthur. Right away. Donovan fled the penthouse, his mind racing. He had to find out what had happened to Arthur on those streets. He had to find a way to save his project. He had to find a way to control the narrative. This wasn't just about a building. It was about the future of the company. It was about his future. Harris was faster. By the time Arthur reached his sterile white office on the 80th floor, an encrypted tablet was waiting on his desk. Harris's report was concise, and it hit Arthur like a physical blow. Subject 1, Maya, surname unknown, age approx. 7. Subject 2, Ilara, surname unknown, age approx. 19. Assumed sister and guardian. Address, 4B, the Stanton Building, 9th and Stanton. Financials, 3 days delinquent on rent. Final eviction notice issued by Vance Holdings Property Management, LLC. Notes, Ilara works 2 jobs, waitress, Apex cleaning. Subject Maya collects recyclables, no other known family. The report included a photo. It was a long-range shot of Maya and Ilara sitting on their fire escape. Ilara had her arm around Maya, and they were pointing at something in the sky. They were smiling. Arthur stared at the address. 4B, the Stanton building, his eviction notice, his urban renewal project. The staggering profit Donovan was so proud of was being built on the wreckage of this tiny family. The girl who had given him half an apple, who had shown him the first shred of human kindness he'd felt in a year, was being made homeless by him. He felt a wave of nausea so profound he had to grip the edge of his desk. The cruelty wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't a line on a spreadsheet. It had a name. It had a face. It had her sister's smile. He thought of his son, Thomas. Thomas, who had screamed at him during their last fight. You don't just own buildings, Dad. You own the lives inside them, and you crush them. You crush them all for $1 more. Arthur had dismissed it as youthful idealism, as a failure to understand the complexities of business. Now the words echoed in the sterile office, a damning indictment. He was the dragon. He was the monster in the dark, and he hadn't even known it. Just then, Donovan entered, holding a stack of binders. Arthur, here's the macro data on the Stanton project. As you can see, the ROI is... Get out, Arthur whispered. What? Get out, Julian. Arthur's voice was a low growl. He didn't look up from the tablet. Donovan, seeing the look on his face, the pale, rigid fury, wisely deposited the binders and backed out of the room, closing the door softly. Arthur was alone again, with the picture of Maya and Ilara. He knew what he had to do, but first he had to see them again, not as Arthur Vance, the billionaire, but as Artie. He had to understand. He opened his secure closet, past the rows of handmade Italian suits, to the back. There, in a biohazard bag, were the clothes he had worn for 34 days. He opened the bag, The stench of the alley filled his pristine office. He began to change. That evening, Ilara was a wreck. She had $87 in her pocket. Her dream jar, where she and Maya put spare change for their house with a yard, held another $12. 45. She had begged her boss at the diner for an advance. He had laughed. She had called the Apex cleaning supervisor to ask for more shifts. They said they'd put her on the list. The automated voice from Vance Holdings' tenant line simply informed her that no extensions are available at this time. She was sitting at her drafting table, but the page was blank. The eviction notice was taped to the wall in front of her, a death warrant. Maya was quiet, sensing the suffocating blanket of despair that had fallen over the small apartment. "Ilara," Maya asked, climbing onto the bed. Are we going to be like Artie?" Ilara looked up, confused. "Artie? Who's Artie?" "The man in the alley, the one I gave the apple to. He doesn't have a house. He sleeps on paper." Ilara's heart clenched. She crossed the room and sat on the bed, pulling Maya into her lap. "No, baby, no. I won't let that happen. I promise you. I will. I'll figure something out. We're a team, right? We're the Stanton sisters. We're tough." But her voice broke on the last word. She was so tired of being tough. She just wanted to be 19. She just wanted to draw. A knock echoed from their thin apartment door. It wasn't the heavy, official knock of the sheriff. It was a hesitant, soft tapping. Ilara and Maya froze. They never got visitors. "Who is it?" Ilara called, her voice tight. A low, raspy voice came through the wood. It's Artie, from the market. I was just checking on the girl." "On Maya." Maya scrambled off Ilara's lap. "It's him. It's Artie." Ilara shot her a terrified look. "Maya, no. You don't talk to strangers. He's not a stranger. He's Artie. He's my friend." Before Ilara could stop her, Maya had darted to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. She peeked out. There he was, the sad giant from the alley. He looked cleaner than before, his hair combed back with water, but he was still in the same ruined clothes. He looked impossibly large and sad in their narrow, peeling hallway. Arthur's heart was pounding so hard he thought it would burst. He had given Harris the slip, a feat in itself, and taken the subway back to Stanton. He had walked up the 4 flights of stairs, his legs, now accustomed to fine living again, burning. He had almost turned back a dozen times. What was he doing? This was insane. But then he saw Maya's face, her grin of pure, unadulterated recognition. "You came," she said. "Artie. Mr. Artie," Ilara said, stepping in front of Maya, her body language pure defense. "What do you want? We don't have any money." Arthur held up his hands, palms out. They were still the hands of a billionaire, manicured, despite the grime he'd reapplied. But he hoped the desperation in his eyes was real. It was real. "Please," he rasped, playing the part he knew. "I don't want anything. I wanted to thank her. For the apple." He looked at Maya. "It was the best apple I've ever had." Ilara softened, just a fraction. This broken man was no threat. He was just sad. "Okay," she said, her voice still wary. "She's fine. Thank you for checking. But we're busy." "I heard you're in trouble," Arthur said, pressing his luck. He nodded at the eviction notice, posted on the outside of her door just as it was on the inside. He had seen them plastered all down the hall. His company's name, Vance Holdings, was on every single one. "Everyone in this building is," Ilara said bitterly, her fear being replaced by a sudden, weary anger. "Some rich bastard named Vance bought the whole block. He's kicking us all out so he can build condos for his other rich bastard friends." Arthur flinched as if he'd been struck. "Vance," he repeated. "He must be a terrible man." "He's not a man," Ilara said, her eyes flashing. He's a corporation. A monster. He wouldn't know a real person if we bit him. He probably sleeps on a bed of money and eats diamonds for breakfast. She looked at Artie, her fellow victim. He doesn't know what it's like. To work until your bones ache and still not have enough. To have to choose between electricity and food. To have to tell your little sister. Her voice choked. Maya, seeing her sister crumble, ran and hugged her legs. It's okay, Alara. We can go live with Artie in his alley. We can build a paper house. Arthur Vance, the vulture, the dragon, the titan of industry, felt his knees buckle. He had to lean against the doorframe. He was the monster. He was the one who ate diamonds for breakfast. And his actions were sending this brilliant, fierce young woman and this angel of a child to a paper house in an alley. Maybe I can help, Arthur said, his voice thick. Alara let out a short, harsh laugh. You? How? You got a spare $1,400 in your pocket? Arthur looked down. In the pocket of his ruined coat was the roll of hundreds, his lifeline. He could pull it out, solve her problem, and walk away. But he knew with a terrible certainty that it wouldn't solve anything. It would just be a rich man's trick. It wouldn't stop Donovan. It wouldn't save the building. It wouldn't change him. And it would terrify this proud young woman. No, he said, meeting her eyes. I don't have money, but I used to work. I know people. I know how these companies work. Maybe I can talk to them. Find a legal thing. A loophole. Alara looked at him, her gaze searching. He looked like a wreck, but his eyes were sharp. They weren't the dull, vacant eyes of the other addicts in the neighborhood. There was an intelligence there, a power that didn't match his clothes. Why would you do that? She asked, her voice suspicious. Why would you help us? Arthur looked at Maya, who was watching him with complete trust. Because, he said, his voice cracking for real this time, she gave me half an apple, when no one else would give me the time of day. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some composure. My son. He used to talk about people like you, people who fight. He admired it. He would want me to help. The mention of his son, the true raw grief in his voice, did what no amount of money could have. It broke through Alara's defenses. She saw a fellow traveler in loss. You have a son? She asked, her voice soft. I did, Arthur said. He's gone. A silence settled between them, a shared understanding of grief that transcended class, and wealth, and sanity. Okay, Alara said finally, making a decision. Okay, Artie, you can. You can try. I don't know what good it will do, but you can try. Thank you, Arthur said. I'll go now. I'll go see what I can find out. Don't give up. You're the Stanton sisters. You're tough. He used her own words back at her, and she gave him a small, watery smile. Yeah, she whispered. We are. Arthur turned and walked down the hall, his heart a leaden weight. He didn't take the subway. He walked, for 2 hours, all the way back to Vance Tower. He let himself in through a private entrance, took the service elevator to his penthouse, and stood in his living room, still in the foul-smelling clothes. Harris was waiting for him, his face impassive. Your walk was bracing, sir. It was clarifying, Arthur said. He stripped off the Artie costume and threw it in a heap. Get Donovan, get the entire executive board, and get legal. I want them in the main conference room in 1 hour. I don't care if they're sleeping, flying, or dead. Get them there. Sir, Harris said, it's 10:01 p.m. Then it will be a night they'll never forget, Arthur snarled. Oh, and Harris, get me the CEO of Apex Cleaning on the phone, and the owner of the Starlight Diner on 9th Street. Yes, now. Harris, for the second time that day, almost smiled. "At once, sir." The 80th floor conference room was a cavern of glass and black steel, dominated by a 50-foot mahogany table. By 11:15 p.m., it was filled with 15 of the most powerful executives in the city, all in rumpled suits, silk pajamas under overcoats, and varying states of panic and confusion. Julian Donovan stood at the head of the table, trying to maintain control. "I'm sure Arthur has a perfectly reasonable explanation for this." "Unorthodox meeting," he was saying, when the doors hissed open. Arthur Vance strode in. He was not the broken Artie. He was not the contemplative Arthur. This was the Vulture. He was immaculate in a dark charcoal suit, his face set like granite. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table and stared at them one by one, letting the silence stretch until it was agonizing. "The Stanton District Urban Renewal Project is dead," he announced, his voice quiet but echoing with absolute power. The room exploded. "Arthur, that's insane. We'll be sued. The shareholders will revolt." Donovan held up his hands. "Arthur, please, let's be rational. This is $100 million write-down, minimum. We can't just—" "Stop." "We can," Arthur said, "and we will. As of this moment, Vance Holdings is exiting the predatory residential real estate market." "Predatory," Donovan spluttered. "It's strategic. It's profitable." "It's monstrous," Arthur said, his voice dropping. And then he told them. He told them about the alley. He told them about Mr. Griggs. He told them about a 7-year-old girl named Maya. And he told them about an apple split in two. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke with a cold, precise fury that was more terrifying than any shouting. He told them about Alara, about her 2 jobs, about her art, about the building improvement fee that his company had used to deliberately and legally break her back. He picked up one of Donovan's binders and hurled it against the glass wall, where it hit with a sickening thud and splayed open. Pages detailing profit margins fluttered to the floor. "This," Arthur roared, "is not profit, it's theft, it's soulless. We are the dragons, gentlemen. We are the monsters, and I will not build my son's legacy on the bones of children." He pointed a shaking finger at Donovan. "You're done, Julian. Your vision is repugnant. Security will escort you from the building. Your assets are frozen pending a full audit of your creative accounting." Donovan turned white. "You can't do this. The board," Arthur said, "will vote with me, or they will be replaced. This is no longer a democracy. It is a moral imperative." He looked at the stunned, silent faces. "Now, here's what we are going to do. The Stanton building will not be demolished. It will be renovated at our cost. The leases for every current tenant will be rewritten, locking in their current rent for a term of 20 years. A woman from legal stammered, "Mr. Vance, that's financial suicide. We'll be a charity." "Exactly," Arthur said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "The entire Stanton portfolio, all 3 blocks, is to be transferred, effective immediately. We are establishing a new entity, the Thomas Vance Foundation. Its entire purpose will be the acquisition and development of low-income housing, community centers, and arts programs. We will fund it with the profits from the logistics division. We will, in short, stop taking and start giving." He looked at the stunned faces. "Any questions?" No one spoke. The Vulture had become something else. Something scarier. Something righteous. "Good," Arthur said. "Now get to work. I want the paperwork drawn up by dawn. I want the eviction notices rescinded. Personally. By 8 a.m. And I want a new lease and a letter of apology on the desk of Alara in apartment 4B. The next morning, Alara was woken by a knock. It was 7:30. "Hey. M. She hadn't slept. She and Maya were sitting on the floor, packing their few belongings into cardboard boxes. "Go away," Alara shouted, tears of exhaustion streaming down her face. We're not ready. We need more time." The knock came again, firmer this time. "Ms. Alara, my name is Arthur. I'm from the property management company. Please open the door. I'm not here to evict you." Alara's blood ran cold. Arthur, not Artie, a different man. She opened the door a crack. Standing in the hallway was not a sheriff. It was a tall, incredibly well-dressed man with gray hair and the same burning, intelligent eyes as Artie. He looked like Artie, if Artie had been scrubbed clean, dipped in gold, and given a soul. Arthur Vance, in his $5,000 suit, stood in the peeling hallway holding a simple manila envelope. He felt more terrified than he had in the boardroom. "Ms. Alara," he said, his voice hoarse. May I come in?" Alara, stunned, opened the door. Maya peeked out from behind her and her eyes went wide. "It's you," Maya shouted. "It's Artie. You got a haircut." Arthur's composure broke. He smiled, a real trembling smile. "I did," he said, looking at Maya. "And a shower." He turned back to Alara, who was looking back and forth between them, her mind short-circuiting. I'm not Artie," Arthur tried to explain. "My name is Arthur Vance. Artie was me. But I wasn't being honest." Alara's face hardened. "Vance, like on the notice?" "Yes," Arthur said, bowing his head. "It's my company. It's all my fault." Alara's hand balled into a fist. "You," she spat. "You came here. You pretended. You spied on us. Was this some sick game? Do you get off on watching the little people squirm before you crush them?" "No," Arthur said, desperate. "No, God, no, I was lost. My son died. I was trying to understand the world. I didn't know about any of this. I didn't know about you, or the evictions. Not until," he looked at Maya, "not until yesterday. Not until the apple." He held out the envelope. This is a new lease. Your rent is, well, it's taken care of. For as long as you want to live here. The building is not being sold. It's being repaired. All of it." Alara stared at the envelope, refusing to take it. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity," Arthur said, his voice passionate. It's restitution. It's an apology. An apology for everything. For my company. For what we put you through." He opened the envelope himself and pulled out a second document. This is also for you. My team. They saw your drawings. The ones on the table." Alara reflexively tried to cover her sketchbook. "They are brilliant. This is a full 4-year scholarship to the New York Art Institute, all expenses paid. And this, a third paper, is a job offer. I'm starting a new foundation in my son's name. It's going to build new community spaces, new parks, new housing, and I need someone to design them, someone who understands what people actually need. Someone who knows what it's like to live here. I need you, Alara. If you'll have me." Alara was trembling, unable to process the words. Scholarship. Job. New lease. She looked at Arthur Vance, the billionaire, the monster, the sad giant from the alley. She saw the truth in his eyes, the grief, the shame, and the desperate, aching hope. She finally took the papers from his hand. She read the scholarship letter. Her knees gave out, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, the paper fluttering in her grasp. I don't understand," she whispered. Maya, who hadn't understood the words restitution or scholarship, understood the most important thing. She walked up to Arthur, bold as brass, and tugged on the sleeve of his expensive suit. "Does this mean we don't have to live in a paper house?" Arthur Vance knelt, so he was eye to eye with the 7-year-old girl who had saved him. His eyes filled with tears, the ones he had held back in the boardroom. "No, Maya," he whispered, his voice thick. "You don't. And I need to ask you something. I was very, very sick, in my heart. And you gave me the medicine, you gave me your apple, you saved my life. And I was wondering if you and your sister, if you'd be my friends." Maya didn't hesitate. She threw her small, wiry arms around his neck, hugging him with all her might. "Of course," she said into his shoulder. "Friends share." Over her head, Arthur looked at Ilara. She was crying, but for the first time in 2 years they were not tears of fear or exhaustion. They were tears of release. She nodded, slowly. "Friends," she agreed. The priceless reaction wasn't just Arthur's. It was Ilara's when she walked onto the campus of the Art Institute for the first time. It was the cheer that went up from the tenants of the Stanton building when the scaffolding went up, not for demolition, but for renewal. It was even Mr. Griggs's at the market. Arthur had approached him, not as Artie, but as himself. He had funded a new community food program to be run out of the market, with Griggs at the helm, distributing unsold fruit to the neighborhood's needy, including the Arties in the alleys. Griggs, given a new purpose beyond guarding his apples, became the program's fiercest, kindest advocate. 3 months later, Arthur, Ilara, and Maya stood in a newly opened community garden in the lot beside their building, the first project of the Thomas Vance Foundation, designed by Ilara herself. Arthur was no longer in a suit. He wore jeans and a simple sweater. He and Maya were putting a small sapling into the ground. "You're doing it wrong," Maya instructed, bossing the billionaire around. "You have to pat the dirt down, like this, so he's cozy." "Right. Cozy," Arthur said, patting the dirt. He looked up at Ilara, who was sketching in her notepad, a real, relaxed smile on her face. His life was no longer empty. It was filled with the shouts of children playing, the smell of fresh paint, and the taste of apples. He had lost a son, but he had found a family. And he had learned that the true measure of a man's worth wasn't in the dollars he hoarded, but in the kindness he was willing to share. A lesson taught to him by a 7-year-old thief with a heart bigger than his entire empire. The smallest acts of kindness can start the biggest revolutions. The world is full of people who feel invisible, both in our poorest alleys and in our richest towers. But as Maya and Arthur learned, everyone is just one connection away from being found. What half an apple can you share today? You never know whose life, including your own, you might save. Thanks for watching.